Okay, my YouTuber brothers and sisters, this is a first tray of a first video about some jade I got. I have a lot of it, so they're probably going to see more than one video on this subject. But anyway, here's the story. I'll be scanning around here a little bit, and I'll explain the story, okay? A surfer friend of mine who really wants to remain nameless, who watches the papers for auction sales, you know, like storage lockers, that sort of thing. And his parents were antique store owners and big antique collectors, and they're deceased now. But he saw in the paper a storage locker going to sell from a guy who was, well, let's put it this way, from a guy whose name was kind of an anagram for an old friend of his parents. It's like, you know, instead of being Lewis, it was like, you know, something different. And, you know, instead of like, you know, anyway, you know what I'm talking about. It was a radical different spelling of words that, of a name that sounded the same to a guy who was an old jade collector friend that used to come and have dinner at his folks' house. And so he calls me up and says, you know, I'm at this auction and blah, blah, blah. There's one guy here besides me bidding that's really bidding. And he's wearing really old nasty clothes, and he's got like on $500 shoes, he says. So I know there's something funny going on, right? And so he calls me up and he says, listen, if it runs over, there's this one big chest that's got a lock on it that is absolutely rusted shut. Big old steamer trunk, really heavy. And I'm going to try and buy it because I've seen a couple of other things that were opened up that had pretty nice jade pieces in it. So he said, I'm going to, you know, try my luck. And he said, if this guy, there's only one other person been looking at it, even got near this trunk. And it's that guy with the funny, nice shoes. And he said, if that guy bids on it, you know, if I split everything with you, will you loan me, you know, the extra money I don't have? Because I'm probably not going to have enough, I'm afraid. So, needless to say, that's what happened. He calls me up and says, go get a whole bunch of money and come on down here real quick, man. You're going to love it. And so, that was it. We brought it home, cut the lock off with a torch, and inside was all of these kind of things, plus some larger statues too, and I'm not going to show them today, as well as quite a number of very interesting stone and crystal skulls, jade skulls, large ones. But anyway, so here's what we got. Now, I'm going to tell you, the vast majority of these things here seem to be maybe copies of stuff from a culture called the Hongshan culture, and they were out of southern Mongolia, and they were the very first really civilized people in all of China. They were, you know, they were like the founding civilization in China of like 7,500 to 9,000 years ago. And this was before language, and so they started making things like this, you know, like in the Chinese language and back in that language too, which is, you know, root of some of the Chinese languages. Many of their words are homonyms, which means basically it can be like there, and there, but with, you know, names for nouns, and so they can take. For instance, a square is the same word as great fortune, and their word for circle is something like going to happen to you right now and forever. You know, this is going to be something that goes on forever with you. So what they would do is they would combine symbols to make symbolic stuff like this that says great fortune is going to be with you forever, before they had any kind of writing. And so they kept the things like this as like amulets or good luck tokens or charms or stuff like that. And I mean, I've looked up in the British Museum of, the biggest museum of antiquities and arts and stuff of humans all over the world, in the British Museum, and they have a giant jade collection from the years, when they ruled China. And they have things exactly like almost all of these things. I have way more than they do, anyway, that they show. But and they identified something like this as having been part of a sword, like the thing that you gotta, I forget what it's called, but the little deal at the bottom of the sword to keep someone else's blade from sliding down and cutting your fingers off. It hits this. It's like a finger protector, part of a sword or saber. And then, other stuff like this. You just go figure what the heck that is. Okay. But, and then these things here are basically cicadas. And a cicada was a very holy thing to them. And almost everything I got is a pendant, except for a very few. So it'll have holes. And if you note, those holes are drilled with stone bits because they're biconically drilled and meet in the center. And I'd swear I've dug off a little bit of that out of some of them. I've dug off that stuff that's down inside them, and it looks identical to the different colored. But in terms of the structure of it, I've looked at it under microscopes. It looks identical to the caliche that, for instance, Kenny Hooten sent me some points one time that were just broken pieces, but had all the original Greek caliche on them, and because I asked him for different types of patinas, like field patina, creek patina, rock shelter patina. So he sent me just broken bits and pieces. Man, that stuff looks like broken bits and pieces to me. Now, I'm not saying these are old. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, because basically, once the original forms were made, they continued to make them for, all the way up until, relatively modern times. As I say, the Orientals, the Chinese in particular, consider jade to be like the threshold between the world of spirituality and the world of physical, fact realm, mass, between like matter and energy, but with spirituality in the real world. And so with that kind of explanation, and all of these forms are like, they've got a meaning to them. For instance, these things here, many of the big emperors that they found their tombs and dug them up, these guys would have these things on their tongues. So what the meaning of that, I don't know. But, I've read that in a half a dozen places. Needless to say, now, since I've got these, and it's been close to a year, I have just been buying jade books, studying, talking to people, reading online, everything I can do. And I just can't. There is just no way to find someone who, like all of the jade the authenticators that I have gotten a hold of. First, I've sent a few pieces off. I mean, they sent me back stuff like they would say about arrowheads. That, a bunch of the things they said weren't even on these pieces in any way, shape, or form. So I could tell all they did was just pulled out their standard, sheet form of the, what they put on arrowheads, and they just, wrote my name on it and wrote the name of the piece and took a picture of it and sent me like, a stock copy of what he would send turning down an arrowhead. So I know they knew nothing. And then I've talked to other guys who, basically all they want to do is figure out a way, they want to tell you it's worthless, and then they want to try and buy it. And they increase their prices when they're trying to buy it. So obviously it's not worthless, but at the same time they're not telling you, yeah, this is, 4,000 or 3,000 or, which dynasty of China or whatever, primarily because I don't think they know. But I mean, look at how old the surface of this stuff looks. And, real deals that are documented like this, they sell for thousands of bucks a piece. And, other things are just completely, I don't understand what they are, what they mean, except for the fact it's, as you can see, it's a pendant with holes in it, with 2 holes, and it hangs around something like that. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure what they hung them on, but this thing here, I think, is probably a bat because it would hang upside down. But you tell me, is that a bat face or an owl face? Now, another thing from the Hongshan culture, even the museums identify a great many of those things as aliens. They just call them outright aliens. Now, I'll get to some of my aliens later, but now this is just showing you conventional shapes. There was a what looked to be the remains of a whole necklace of these cool little turtle shells, and they string end to end, but almost everything else hangs like a, so this I'm pretty sure was a necklace or part of a necklace, or I don't know, maybe could have been a drop, but since there were so many there and they had like rotten string in them. Now, something else, when we opened that trunk, seaman's trunk, or whatever you call them, there had been a hole in the side where rats had chewed through it, so there were like rat nests in there. We know this guy had the storage locker at least 10 years because he had paid 10 years in advance on it, in cash, under a bogus name. So, I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on why he would do that. Maybe because he had 4 wives and kids by every wife and didn't want them all hitting on him is what I figure. But at any rate, so a certain amount of that stuff had like the smell of rat urine on it, really hard. Now I'll show you what I've done about that. I've got it all off of all of them now, but I've been doing this systematically to most of them. Hold on one second. Nothing but a shout out here to Ben. You recognize that leather, Ben? I'm still loving it after all this time, buddy. I use it as a background. I use it for all kinds of things. Thanks so much, the Tribe of Benjamin. You're the best, bud. Okay, another shout out. Satuspa. Skulls next time. Crystal skulls. Jade skulls. Agate skulls. Ancient ones. No kidding. Ancient ones.